The Exodus is one of the most famous stories ever told. Millions celebrated every Passover. Right? It inspired the civil rights movement. Countless films depict it. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The ancient Egyptians, obsessive record keepers who documented everything from grain shipments to diplomatic marriages, never once mentioned Moses, 10 plagues, or an army drowning in the sea. So did it happen? The answer is more interesting than a simple yes or no. We have no direct Egyptian confirmation of the Exodus, but we do have one crucial piece of evidence, the Merneptah Stele. A stele is an upright stone slab with inscriptions. This one, carved in 1204 BCE, contains the earliest reference to Israel outside the Bible. The pharaoh Merneptah boasts, Israel is laid waste, his seed is no more. This proves Israel existed in Canaan by the late 13th century BCE. It doesn't prove how they got there, but it gives us a fixed point to work backward from. If Israel was established in Canaan by 1204 BCE, subtract roughly 20 years for settlement, that puts their arrival around 1225 BCE, subtract 40 years of wilderness wandering, the biblical number, and we land at approximately 1265 BCE for the Exodus itself. So that date matters. In 1265 BCE, Ramses II sat on Egypt's throne. He's famous for massive building projects throughout the Nile Delta, exactly where the Bible places Hebrew slaves making bricks. The city of Ramses was rebuilt on the site of an older Hyksos capital, right in the Goshen region. The timing and geography align, but some scholars propose an earlier theory that pushes the timeline back 5 centuries. The Hyksos theory offers an attractive explanation. The Hyksos were Semitic people who invaded and ruled northern Egypt starting around 1720 BCE. Semitic rulers in Egypt could explain how Joseph, a Hebrew, rose to power under Pharaoh. When native Egyptians reconquered their land in the 16th century BCE, expelling the Hyksos, this could explain the biblical phrase, a pharaoh arose who knew not Joseph. The new regime would have no loyalty to Semitic peoples. Oppression follows naturally. But here's the problem. This theory requires the Israelites to remain in Egypt for over 300 years before the Exodus. The biblical text itself creates chronological chaos. Exodus 12:40 states the Israelites lived in Egypt for 430 years, but Exodus 6 lists only 4 generations from Levi to Moses. Levi, Kohath, Amram, Moses. 4 generations equals roughly 80 years, not 430. Both numbers appear in the same book. Then there's the 480 years from Exodus to Solomon's temple. That number equals 12 times 40, 12 tribes times 1 generation. This is theological math, not historical chronology. Ancient writers use numbers symbolically in ways modern readers miss. 40 represents a generation or period of testing. 12 represents completeness, the 12 tribes. When we see 480 years, we're reading a theological statement about Israel's journey, not a precise count of solar years. This doesn't mean the writers were lying. They operated with different assumptions about what numbers communicate. Modern history prioritizes accuracy and evidence. Ancient sacred history prioritized meaning and identity. The Exodus story answered fundamental questions. Who are we? We are the people God freed from slavery. Whose are we? We belong to the God who heard our cries. What has God done? He defeated the world's greatest empire for us. Despite the chronological problems, circumstantial evidence does support a 13th century setting. Egyptian records describe hungry nomads entering the delta during famines, exactly what Genesis describes. Semitic slaves are well attested in Egyptian documents. Workers called apiru, possibly connected to the word Hebrew, labored on Ramses building projects. Papyri describe tight border control in the eastern delta. Officials report pursuing runaway slaves. None of this proves the Exodus happened, but it shows the biblical narrative fits plausibly within what we know about 13th century Egypt. The setting is authentic, even if we can't verify the specific events. The story wasn't invented from nothing. It reflects genuine conditions in the late Bronze Age. The strongest argument comes from names. Moses is not a Hebrew name, it's Egyptian. The element Amses or Moses means born of. Ramses means born of Ra, the sun god. Tutmosis means born of Sos, the wisdom god. Moses appears to be born of something, with the deity's name removed. The biblical explanation that Moses means drawn from water is folk etymology. A popular but incorrect explanation, Aaron and Pinhas are also Egyptian names. Why would Israelites invent a hero with an Egyptian name? Why claim your ancestors were slaves? These details suggest something historical underlies the tradition. Let's address a common misconception. Some argue that no evidence means the Exodus didn't happen. But absence of evidence doesn't equal evidence of absence, especially for events involving non-elite populations. Egyptian records rarely mention defeats or embarrassments. Pharaohs didn't commission monuments celebrating disasters. However, the scale described, 600,000 men plus families, perhaps 2 million people, would leave archaeological traces we simply don't find. No campsites, no pottery, no burial sites. The numbers are almost certainly exaggerated, following the ancient practice of using large numbers to convey significance. Another misconception: if the Exodus isn't historically accurate, it's worthless. This applies modern standards to ancient texts. Sacred history served different purposes than modern documentary history. The Exodus story shaped Israelite identity for 3,000 years. It inspired enslaved peoples across centuries to believe liberation was possible. It established ethical obligations. You shall not oppress the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. The story's power and influence are historical facts, regardless of whether the specific events occurred as described. When reading ancient texts, ask not only, did this happen, but what did this story mean to them? That question often reveals more than archaeological investigation alone. So what's the verdict? We cannot prove the Exodus happened as the Bible describes. The numbers don't work. The archaeological silence is real, but we also cannot prove it didn't happen. Circumstantial evidence places the story in a plausible 13th century setting. Egyptian names, authentic conditions, and the why invent this argument suggest some historical kernel. The Exodus may not be history as we understand it, but it was never meant to be. It was sacred history, a theologically interpreted tradition that told ancient Israelites who they were, whose they were, and what their God had done. That's not a lesser kind of truth. It's a different kind, one that shaped civilizations and continues to resonate wherever people cry out for freedom.